If someone had told me a year ago that I would become the reason for the collapse of a 30-year marriage, I would have just laughed. My name is Joel, and I work as a mechanic technician at one of the auto repair shops in Portland. Ordinary life, ordinary job. Until the moment I met Eva at the gym. At first, it was just a friendly conversation near the exercise machines. She told me she worked as a construction engineer, mentioned her husband Christian, who worked with dogs. It seemed like she had everything going well in her life. But after a month of our conversations, something changed. Eva started staying after workouts and we would go for coffee. She talked about her work, I talked about mine. Nothing special, just pleasant communication. And then she suggested we go together for a weekend to Los Angeles. She said she needed to get away from the routine, that Christian had been too busy with his dogs lately and barely paid attention to her. I agreed, although I understood this could complicate the situation. But Eva was an attractive woman, and I felt sympathy for her. That weekend in Los Angeles became the beginning of our affair. Eva was completely different from what I expected. Passionate, lively, full of energy. She told me that she and Christian had been together for about 30 years, but in recent years their relationship had become more like domestic cohabitation. Returning to Portland, we continued to meet. Eva said that for the first time in many years she felt truly alive. She talked about having children with Christian, but they were already grown and living separately. But what surprised me most was that after some time I found out I wasn't the only one. By accident, during one of our meetings, Eva received a message from someone named Mark. Then there was David. And then Alex. When I asked her about it, she didn't deny it. She said she was just looking for what she was missing in life. That each person gave her something special, unique. I realized that for her, I was just one of the entertainments. It hurt, but I couldn't stop our meetings. Eva had some kind of power over me. And then something happened that I didn't expect. Eva started asking me for financial help. At first, small amounts for gas for lunch. Then larger ones. She said that Christian controlled all their expenses, and she needed money for personal things. I gave her money, not suspecting that she was actually collecting funds for something completely different. Later I found out that she had opened a secret account and was transferring part of their family savings there. Everything changed the day when an unfamiliar man approached me. Tall, with gray hair and tired eyes. He introduced himself as Christian. "I know about you," he said calmly. "And not only about you." It turned out that Christian had known about his wife's infidelities for several weeks already. He noticed how the message history on her phone had changed. Some conversations were deleted, others edited. When he tried to recover the data, he found traces of correspondence with several men. Christian asked his friend to follow Eva. And he confirmed his worst suspicions. She was meeting not only with me, but also with 3 other men. "You know what's the worst?" Christian asked. "Not the cheating. It's that she was stealing money from our joint account. Money we were saving for our old age." But then he smiled a strange smile. "But I'm not a fool. 2 years ago, sensing something was wrong, I started transferring part of the money to an offshore account. Which she doesn't know about." Christian told me his plan. He was going to file for divorce, but first he wanted Eva to destroy all her relationships with her lovers herself. "I want you to give this to her." He handed me a flash drive. "Tell her you found this in your car after she wrote in it. Say there are photos of her with other men on it, and that someone is probably watching her." At first, I didn't want to participate in this. But then I understood, Eva was using me just like the others. For her, I was just a way to get what she wanted. When I showed Eva the flash drive and told her about the photos, she was terribly frightened. She started calling all her lovers, accusing us of someone blackmailing her. Mark was the first to break off relations with her, then David, then Alex. Each thought the others were setting him up. And a week later, Christian announced the divorce to her. When she tried to get half of their savings, it turned out that only an insignificant amount remained in the account. The main money was safe. The court divided their property equally. The apartment, furniture, even their golden retriever had to be given to good hands because no one could take full care of him. Eva hoped that after the divorce she and I would be together. But I realized that I didn't want to build a relationship with a person who lies so easily. If she cheated on her husband for 30 years, what would stop her from cheating on me too? The last time I saw Eva was near the gym where we met. She was standing by the entrance watching people going inside. Probably looking for someone new. And Christian? He started a new life. His dog business is thriving, he found a new apartment and seems to have found the peace he hadn't had for years. Sometimes I think about whether Eva really loved her husband, as she said. Probably she loved him in her own way. But that turned out not to be enough to avoid destroying everything they had built together. And I learned an important lesson. When a person is ready to betray their closest ones, sooner or later they will betray you too. But this story doesn't end there. What I didn't know at the time was that Christian's revenge was much more elaborate than I initially thought. 3 months after their divorce was finalized, I received another visit from Christian. This time he looked different, more confident, almost satisfied. "I thought you should know how this all played out," he said, settling into a chair across from me in the coffee shop where we met. It turned out that Christian had been planning this for much longer than I realized. The offshore account wasn't just a precaution, it was part of a larger strategy. He had been documenting Eva's financial irregularities for over 2 years, not just her affairs. Eva wasn't just stealing from our joint account, Christian explained. She was also embezzling from her construction company. Small amounts at first, but it added up. I have records of everything. Christian had been working with a forensic accountant friend of his, building a case not just for divorce but for financial fraud. The flash drive I had given to Eva wasn't just about the photos, it contained keylogger software that tracked all her financial transactions once she plugged it into her computer. She panicked and tried to cover her tracks, Christian continued. But every move she made just gave us more evidence. The fake invoices, the redirected payments, the phantom contractors, we documented it all. Eva's construction company had discovered the embezzlement shortly after our weekend in Los Angeles. They had been conducting an internal audit, and Eva's nervous behavior and sudden attempt to access company funds remotely had raised red flags. But here's where Christian's plan became truly devastating. Instead of letting the company press charges immediately, he convinced them to let Eva continue working while they gathered more evidence. He wanted her to believe she was safe while building an airtight case. The beautiful part, Christian said with a cold smile, was watching her try to manipulate all of you. She told Mark she needed money for her sick mother. She told David she was investing in a startup. She told Alex she was buying property. And you, she told you it was for personal expenses because I controlled everything. Each lie was documented, each financial transaction tracked. Christian had been building a web around Eva that she couldn't escape from. The weekend in Los Angeles that started our affair? Christian knew about it beforehand. His friend wasn't just following Eva, he was photographing everything, creating a timeline of her activities and financial crimes. I could have stopped it all earlier, Christian admitted. But I wanted her to reveal her true character completely. I wanted everyone to see who she really was. The divorce settlement that seemed fair was actually heavily in Christian's favor. Eva didn't realize that the apartment they shared was heavily mortgaged with debt she had accumulated through her secret spending. When the property was divided, she inherited half the debt along with half the assets. Meanwhile, Christian's dog breeding business, which Eva had always dismissed as a hobby, was actually quite profitable. He had been reinvesting earnings into legitimate business ventures that Eva knew nothing about. The dogs were never just pets, Christian explained. I breed champion bloodlines. Some of my puppies sell for $15,000 each. Eva always thought I was wasting time in the backyard with mutts. But the real devastation came when Eva's construction company finally pressed charges. With all the evidence Christian had helped gather, the case was ironclad. Eva faced not just termination but potential jail time for embezzlement. Her professional license was revoked, making it impossible for her to work in construction engineering again. The industry is small and word travels fast about financial crimes. She called me after the charges were filed, Christian said. Crying, begging me to help her. Said she still loved me, that everything she did was because she felt unappreciated and neglected. But Christian wasn't finished. The offshore account contained not just their savings, but also detailed records of every financial crime Eva had committed. He had been feeding information to her company's investigators for months. Eva's attempts to liquidate assets to pay for legal defense were blocked because many of those assets were purchased with stolen money. The court froze her accounts pending the criminal investigation. She lost everything, Christian continued. Her job, her professional reputation, her financial security, her lovers, her family relationships. Her own children won't speak to her after learning how she betrayed not just me, but stole money that was meant for their inheritance. I sat there stunned, realizing I had been a small part of something much larger. Did you plan for her to involve me from the beginning? Christian shook his head. No, that was her choice. But once I knew about you, I realized you could be useful. You were the most genuine of her affairs. The others were clearly just using her for money and easy companionship. You actually seemed to care about her. That's when I understood the full scope of what had happened. Eva hadn't just lost her marriage, she had lost her entire life as she knew it. Every relationship, every financial security, every professional achievement, all destroyed by her own actions and Christian's methodical documentation of them. The ironic part, Christian said, is that I would have forgiven the affairs. 30 years of marriage isn't something you throw away lightly. But the financial betrayal, the lying to her own children about money, the theft from her company that employed dozens of people, that was unforgivable. Eva's sentencing hearing was set for the following month. With her record of financial crimes and the amount she had stolen, she was facing significant prison time. She destroyed trust in the most fundamental way possible, Christian reflected. Not just marital trust but professional trust, family trust, financial trust. She betrayed everyone who depended on her. I asked Christian what he planned to do now. His answer surprised me. I'm expanding the dog breeding business. Moving to a property outside the city where I can have more space. Maybe I'll find someone who appreciates simple honesty over elaborate deception. He stood to leave, then turned back to me. You know, Joel, you were the only one of her lovers who showed any remorse. The others just disappeared when things got complicated. That says something about your character. As Christian walked away, I realized that Eva's story was a cautionary tale about how small deceptions can grow into life-destroying lies. What started as emotional dissatisfaction had evolved into financial crime and the complete destruction of a family. I never saw Eva again after that day at the gym. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to her former company. Her professional life was over, her personal relationships destroyed, her financial future ruined. The golden retriever that had to be rehomed? Christian eventually took him back after moving to his new property. Sometimes I drive by his place and see them playing in the large yard, both seeming happier than they ever were in that cramped apartment. As for me, I learned that revenge isn't always hot and immediate. Sometimes it's cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating. Christian had shown Eva the same lack of mercy she had shown him, her children, and her colleagues. The trust that takes decades to build can be destroyed in moments, but the consequences of that destruction can last a lifetime. Eva learned that lesson the hard way, losing not just her marriage but everything she had worked for over 30 years. And somewhere in all of this, I realized that being the other man doesn't make you special or important. It just makes you another victim of someone else's selfishness and deception. But the story doesn't end with Eva's sentencing. 6 months later, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Eva's daughter, Sarah, whom I had never met but knew about from Eva's stories. "Joel, I need to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice strained. "It's about my mother and what really happened." We met at a small diner in downtown Portland. Sarah was in her late 20s, with Eva's eyes but a harder expression. She had driven up from San Francisco specifically to meet with me. "Mom never told you the whole truth about our family," Sarah began. "Dad wasn't just some passive victim in all this. Their marriage had been broken for years, but not for the reasons Mom told you." Sarah explained that Christian had been emotionally distant for most of her childhood. He had thrown himself into his dog breeding business as a way to avoid dealing with family problems. Eva had begged him for years to go to marriage counseling, to take family vacations, to be more present. Mom started working longer hours because she felt invisible at home, Sarah continued. Dad would spend entire weekends at dog shows, leaving Mom to handle everything alone. When she tried to talk to him about it, he would say she was being dramatic. This painted a different picture of their marriage than what Christian had presented. According to Sarah, Eva's first affair happened 8 years ago, not recently as I had assumed. She had an emotional affair with a colleague, Sarah said. Nothing physical, but Dad found the text messages. Instead of working through it, he became even more controlling and suspicious. Christian had installed tracking software on Eva's phone and computer, monitored her spending, and demanded to know her whereabouts constantly. This surveillance had driven Eva to become more secretive, creating a vicious cycle of distrust. "The offshore account Dad talked about?" Sarah said bitterly. "He opened that after Mom's emotional affair. He was planning his exit strategy for years, systematically hiding assets while pretending to work on their marriage." Sarah showed me bank records she had obtained through a private investigator. Christian hadn't just been hiding money, he had been inflating his business expenses and underreporting income to minimize what would be considered marital assets. Mom's embezzlement at work started as a way to secure her own future, Sarah explained. She knew Dad was hiding money, but she couldn't prove it legally. So she started creating her own safety net. The financial crimes Eva committed were wrong, but they were apparently motivated by a desperate attempt to protect herself from what she saw as Christian's financial manipulation. "Don't get me wrong," Sarah said quickly. What Mom did was illegal and hurt a lot of people. But Dad isn't the innocent victim he portrayed himself as. Sarah also revealed that Christian's friend who had been following Eva was actually a private investigator Christian had hired 2 years before Eva's affairs escalated. The surveillance wasn't reactive, it was premeditated. Dad was building a case against Mom long before she started seeing you or the others, Sarah said. He wanted to destroy her completely, not just divorce her. I asked Sarah why she was telling me all this. Her answer was surprising. Because you were the only one of Mom's friends who seemed to genuinely care about her as a person, she said. The others were clearly just using her. But you actually tried to help her when everything fell apart. Sarah explained that Eva was currently serving her sentence in a minimum security facility. She had been diagnosed with severe depression and was undergoing therapy to understand how her life had spiraled so completely out of control. The therapist says Mom has been living in survival mode for years, Sarah said, making increasingly desperate decisions because she felt trapped and powerless. This didn't excuse Eva's actions, but it provided context that Christian had deliberately omitted from his narrative. Sarah then told me something that made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about the situation. Mom never took any money from you or the other men, she said. The money you gave her? She put it all in a savings account for my younger brother's college fund. She was too proud to tell you it wasn't for herself. I sat there stunned. Eva had never used the money I gave her for personal expenses. She had been secretly supporting her son's education while dealing with her husband's financial manipulation and her own illegal activities at work. Why didn't she just leave Christian years ago? I asked. Because he threatened to destroy her professionally, Sarah replied. Dad has connections in the construction industry through his business associates. He told Mom that if she ever left him, he would make sure she never worked in Portland again. The threat had kept Eva trapped in an increasingly toxic marriage, leading to her desperate attempts to secure financial independence through illegal means. Sarah also revealed that Eva's multiple affairs weren't just about seeking attention or excitement. Mom was looking for someone who would help her leave Dad, she said. She was trying to find a man who would be willing to help her start over somewhere else. Each relationship had been a potential escape route, but none of the men had been willing or able to provide the stability Eva needed to leave her marriage safely. When you came along, Mom thought maybe you might be different, Sarah said. You seemed kind and genuine. But then Dad's plan started working and everyone abandoned her. I felt a complex mix of emotions, anger at being manipulated, but also sympathy for Eva's desperate situation. She had been trapped between her husband's calculated cruelty and her own poor decisions. What happens now? I asked Sarah. Mom gets out in 18 months with good behavior, she said. Her professional license might be restored eventually if she completes a rehabilitation program. But she'll never be able to practice engineering in Oregon again. Sarah was working with a lawyer to try to prove that some of Eva's financial activities were actually self-defense against Christian's asset hiding, but it was an uphill battle. Dad is living very comfortably on his dog breeding farm, Sarah said with obvious resentment. He's already dating someone new, a woman who owns a veterinary clinic. Meanwhile, Mom is in prison. The asymmetry of their fates was stark. Christian had emerged from their marriage financially secure and professionally successful, while Eva had lost everything. I'm not asking you to forgive Mom or get back involved with her, Sarah said as our meeting ended. I just wanted you to know that the story Dad told you wasn't the complete truth. As Sarah drove back to San Francisco, I was left with a much more complex understanding of what had happened. Eva's actions were still inexcusable, but they were the desperate moves of someone who felt cornered and powerless. Christian's revenge had been thorough and devastating, but it was also the culmination of years of emotional manipulation and financial abuse. He had systematically destroyed his wife's life while portraying himself as the innocent victim. The truth, as always, was more complicated than either version of events I had been told. A year later, I ran into Christian at a local pet store. He looked happy and relaxed, clearly thriving in his new life. When he saw me, he approached with a friendly smile. Joel, how have you been? He asked as if we were old friends. I've been better, I replied honestly. You know, Christian said, I never thanked you properly for your help in exposing Eva's true nature. You played a crucial role in bringing the truth to light. I looked at him carefully. The truth about what, exactly? About what kind of person she really was, he said. A liar, a thief, an adulterer. Someone who was willing to betray everyone who trusted her. And what kind of person does that make you? I asked quietly. Christian's expression shifted slightly. Someone who protected himself from a dangerous woman, he replied. By deliberately destroying her life over the course of several years? By documenting her crimes and holding her accountable for her actions, he corrected. I realized then that Christian genuinely believed his own narrative. In his mind, he was the hero of this story, the righteous husband who had exposed his evil wife's treachery. Do you ever think about the fact that you could have just divorced her 8 years ago when you first suspected infidelity? I asked. And let her get away with everything? Christian shook his head. No, she needed to face the full consequences of her choices. As Christian walked away with his new girlfriend, I understood that this had never been about justice or protecting himself. It had been about punishment and control. Christian had wanted to destroy Eva completely, and he had succeeded. The saddest part was that there might have been a time when their marriage could have been saved. But instead of working through their problems, both Eva and Christian had chosen deception and manipulation, ultimately destroying not just their relationship but their entire family. I never contacted Eva after learning the full story from Sarah. What would be the point? Our relationship had been built on mutual deception, hers about the true state of her marriage, mine about my willingness to help her build a new life. But I did learn something important from the whole experience. When people are desperate, they make desperate choices. When they feel trapped, they often trap others. And when marriages die slowly over years of neglect and mistrust, the cleanup is always messier than anyone expects. Eva paid a heavy price for her crimes, but Christian's revenge was so thorough that it revealed something ugly about his own character. In the end, they both lost their humanity in their battle against each other. And I learned to be more careful about getting involved with married people, no matter how convincing their stories about being misunderstood or mistreated might be. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.